Hello, and welcome back to JediMarley. In this video, I'm going to be exploring a concept that I've been thinking about a lot recently, which is the difference between skills and virtues. So this is going to be a bit more focused on people management, my experience working with others, but also talking about development as an individual and better being able to understand these two different concepts. Now, for the longest time, I always thought of skills as really the key development area for every domain throughout your personal life and your professional life. So, whether it be soft skills such as organizational activities or communication style, comparing that to more traditional hard skills or technical skills where you need to read a book, you need to go to school for, you need to really practice with repetition these activities to become a professional in them. So, I always thought of soft skills versus hard skills as both things that you can fully practice and fully develop as an individual, and that you have the same control over both of them. Now, I always knew that personality was something that contributed to the effectiveness and strengths that you have with these different skills, but I always thought of it as more like your stat card when you start out life, as just, oh, I'm strong in communication, but I'm not as strong with attention to detail. And I think it also goes back to that question of nature versus nurture, where obviously some of these personality traits just come inherently with the way that you're born, but a lot of them as well as the environments that you grow up in, the friends that you make, the family that you're around, and just the exposure that you get to these different skills. So I always knew, again, that personality contributed to this in some sort of way. I knew that people were predisposed to have different strengths, different weaknesses, but I always looked at it from the perspective of these are things that you can train. Every single piece, whether it's a soft skill or a hard skill, you can train someone on it. If you see a deficiency or an area that someone needs to grow or work on, that's something that, as someone focused on developing individuals, you have direct control over. You put them in some sort of program, you pass them some sort of training material, you talk to them one on one on this deficiency, all of these being different mechanisms that you can use to attack the problem head on and help to develop that person's strengths. But what I've run into over the last couple of years or really started to think about is areas where I ran into a clear roadblock or just a lot of difficulty in developing a certain skill. So let's say I have a team member who has really poor attention to detail. When they're on call, they're great, they're very animated, they're very conversational, but when you try to work with them offline, the materials that they send over to you or the emails that they send out to clients are consistently inaccurate. They have typos in it, they're not organized well. And so trying to work with someone like that, I think there's a lot of different ways to go about it. But I always was of this perspective that the onus was on me as the manager to go and get someone to be able to develop those skills. So I was recently speaking to someone about this, and they said something that really stuck with me. They said, Marley, you can't train someone on virtues. And that kind of hit me like a wall. What do you mean you can't train someone on virtues? How is that different than training them on any other skill? And it really stuck out to me because a virtue is a truth and an ideal that you personally hold to be very important. Now, each individual, I think we all agree and can be aligned on the list of virtues that are out there. But I think we each have priorities over what virtues matter most to us. Are you someone who cares a lot about attention to detail or honesty or these different virtues that truly at the end of the day are a bit of personality traits? Now, you can develop these virtues, you can practice them, you can develop them over time. It by no means is something where you're stuck with the virtues that you're given at birth or the virtues that you develop through your childhood. But virtues aren't something that you can, I think, get someone else to train you on. You need to be able to recognize internally that the person I am today, the virtues that I hold, the strengths that I have in those virtues, are not where I want to be. I want to be someone who sees attention to detail and organization as more of an important virtue. I want to be able to develop my kindness, where, okay, this is a virtue that I want to have, but I don't have today. So you first have to go and really want that virtue. I want to develop in this area. But then for developing in that area, again, it isn't something that I think you can just read a book, that you can take a class on. It's something that you need to actively yourself develop. So from a virtue perspective, I think it's really interesting the way that you develop your strengths in that area, because you have to go about activities that may be a bit different than the normal, traditional hard skills that you develop. I think meditation is a great one. I think journaling is a great one. But all of the ways that you go and develop virtues are mechanisms that are deeply personal, that get you to explore your own mind, get you to explore your own personality. And so through that sort of practice of philosophy or spirituality or whatever form it is that you're using to explore these virtues that you're disposed to and where you want to take those virtues moving forward and develop them over time, once you get that clear understanding of your mind, you're able to take those into the real world and practice those and actually act out on those virtues. All of these virtuous activities that do represent some sort of objective good, it is something that you need to practice, but you have to practice through self-exploration. I guess it is sort of similar when you think about it from the technical perspective of, okay, I can read books on these skills, but then I need to apply them in practice and see how they work in the real world. But I think it's very different because even though it may feel like as you're learning a technical skill, it's developing as your personality, that isn't you at the end of the day. I think there's obviously so much depth to this topic, and it's one that's just so interesting to me. I could probably explore it in a full 20-minute video. But at least here, I just wanted to start with the exploration at the surface level of understanding the differences between virtues and skills. I think the simplest definition that I can put is, from a virtue perspective, this is something that is directly tied to you as a person, you as an individual. How do you handle your circumstances? How do you portray yourself in the world? How do you go about life? That is a virtue. And then when you think about a skill, you're thinking more about a specific trait or a specific domain. Do I know how to work with internet equipment? Do I know how to drive a car? Do I know how to do something specific? So again, thinking about skills versus virtue, I think it's clear how important a virtue is, because that really dictates how you learn skills, how you develop skills, how you act in whatever role it is that you're playing. There's so many applications to this that I can think about taking. How do I better explore someone's virtues and really the key pillars of them as an individual, effectively exploring their character? But how do I go about that in the interview process? It's pretty easy to go and vet someone of, do you have the right technical skills? But it's much, much harder to get a true feel of a person and really be able to understand their virtues and how that's going to translate to the workspace. I think one of the biggest gaps or issues with skills is just the emphasis that the professional market puts on them. In my experience, there's so many screenings, so many different processes to go and just vet, does someone have the right skills? What code have you written before? What presentations have you done? And I think those are all important pieces, because it certainly takes time to develop skills to the level of becoming a senior individual. But at the same time, I do think there needs to be a stronger emphasis on understanding the individual's virtues, because that truly does influence that person's performance in the long run. And I think the rabbit hole of virtues is also one that you could go too far down, where you're never going to find someone who has all of the virtues perfectly laid out. It's going to be very, very rare and very, very hard for you to find an individual like that. But what you can find is you can focus on, okay, what are the virtues that I care most about for this role? And also expect that, okay, if someone's deficient in this one virtue, that isn't a deal breaker. It's just something I need to be aware of. Okay, they don't have this attention to detail. I can look past this or work with them and just acknowledge that that's how things are going to be. And we need to implement processes and mechanisms to account for that. So again, I think the virtue concept is one that I've never really had that frame of reference to think about individuals, their personality, and their traits from that perspective of a virtue. I've always just referred to it as a soft skill, but I don't think that's attributing the profundity of what it is. It's a virtue. It's a deep component of your own character. And so it's one I'm really excited to continue exploring, continue developing, and continue to work on a perspective behind. So I hope this helps. I hope I'm not the first one to come to this realization that skills are not the same as virtues, and that you can't train or treat a virtue in the same way that you treat a skill. But if you did learn something in this video, please, I ask that you like, I ask that you subscribe. I really like these philosophical conversations. It really gets you to think a bit deeper about not just the specific trade or the specific domain that you work in, but certainly things in aggregate, thinking about the big picture and how we as humans work with each other. But once again, thank you for watching the video and stick around for the next one. Thanks.